Alright, so if I'm understanding this video correctly, what Tectone is saying makes absolutely no sense. What he's saying is to buff up all of the characters to Ganyu's level and buff up the enemies in the form of new world levels. I'll get into why that's bad later, but first of all, what he's saying is basically an illusionated nerf. A nerf that doesn't sound like a nerf, but in reality is just a nerf, but with a really bad negative. Say we buff up characters and enemies. Say you're in these higher world levels. All of the characters, excluding Ganyu, are buffed up to around Ganyu's level, but the enemies are harder. Now, if it stays the way it is now, but Ganyu gets a light nerf, wouldn't all the other characters be performing the exact same way they would if we were to buff up all the characters and the enemies? There would be almost no difference. All the characters are slightly better than they used to be, and they're closer to Ganyu, versus Ganyu is slightly worse than she used to be, and she's closer to everyone else. Either way, everyone else is closer to Ganyu, or Ganyu is closer to everyone else. But there is one massive downside to what he's saying. That is, if I understood him correctly. What I got is that he basically proposes that we add new world levels and make those world levels a lot harder and make it so we level up a lot faster from Era 55 and beyond compared to what it is right now. The problem there is something that exists in Borderlands 3, for example. In that game, with how everything scales and works in the end game, a lot of guns weren't good enough, so they got buffed. But they got buffed because of the scaling is terrible in the end game. In other words, they got buffed to fit the end game specifically. Now go to the early game. Obviously, the early game is insanely easy because everything was buffed for the late game without taking early game into consideration. What Tectone is suggesting would be a recreation of that. Think about it. Free-to-plays, after playing every single day for 4 months, should be AR-54 right now, assuming you haven't done many primo refreshes and spent all of your fragile resin. Even if they nerfed the time it took to get to higher adventure ranks from 55, so much of your time is going to be in the early stages. It'll still take months from AR-55 to hit 60, not to mention 80 as he suggests the cap increases to that in his video. Yes, the game needs to be harder, but this isn't the right way of doing it. I think we need to nerf Ganyu down a little bit and make it so the earlier world levels scale harder than they do right now. The difficulty in the end game is basically the same as it was in the early game, for me at least, so scaling those earlier ranks down sounds like the best solution to me. So, if I missed any details or I completely misunderstood what he was saying, please clown on me. Tell me I am wrong. I want to know why I'm wrong if I am wrong.